What do I need to be good at to be great at something?
Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly. And in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders.
Tap into where your natural curiosity takes you. Just making sure you're not your own roadblock. Even if you do fall, you're going to fall and you're going to learn.
Together, let's build a DNA of what it takes to rise to the top and truly make an impact. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to welcome our guest today, Love+Chew. Lauren is the founder and CEO of Love+Chew Brands, a company that manufactures and distributes tasty protein cookies that are clean label and guilt-free, with a mission to be the leader in the plant-based dessert category and to inspire people to enjoy healthier and more sustainable treats. Love+Chew products are on the shelves of over 2,000 stores, including Sprouts, Costco, Whole Foods Market, and Amazon, reaching millions of consumers across the U.S. Before founding Love+Chew, Lauren worked in the sustainable energy technology space, in an energy storage startup called STEM, and at Tesla in business development, operations, and sales roles. Lauren earned her bachelor's degree in Sociology, International Studies, and Mandarin from the University of California, San Diego. Lauren, it is so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Lauren, first, actually set the scene. You're in the Bay Area, correct?
Yes.
Like, where are you based?
Yeah, so I'm actually in between San Francisco and Las Vegas, which I realize is an odd combination.
Okay. And is that primarily for Love+Chew Brands for the business?
Yeah, so Love+Chew is based in San Francisco. We bake most of our cookies right outside of San Francisco, and then our warehouse is there. And then we moved to Las Vegas full-time during COVID because we have 2 young children, and it's just a lot easier in the suburbs.
Yeah,
So
I love it. Okay, well, we're going to get into all of that. But first, as I like to do, I want to start all the way from the beginning. I want to know, where did you grow up and what type of kid were you? Were you, are there even little hints of entrepreneurship in you at a young age?
Yeah, so I grew up in San Diego, inland of Del Mar, in an area called Carmel Valley. Kind of had like a typical sort of like beach childhood. Was a competitive swimmer, was a beach lifeguard during summers. Definitely like very outdoorsy childhood. I always, as a child, was very conscious of animals and the fact that meat comes from animals, like since I think I was like 5 or 6. So I always wanted to become like a vegetarian or vegan from being a young child. My parents at the time said, that's nice. It was a different time then. When you move out when you're 18, then you can go vegetarian. So when I finally went to college and I moved out, that was the first thing I did was become vegetarian. And then in terms of, wanting to run a business, so growing up, my mom has a small business. So she ran a small spa. And then my grandfather ran a contracting business as well.
Wow.
So definitely in the family for sure.
And it's so amazing so you had that passion for animals where, you didn't want to kill animals to eat. And like you already had that concept in your mind. It's something you had from a young age. Was it a movie you watched? Was it, just animals you had growing up? Where did that actual passion come from, if you can remember?
So I grew up with dogs. And so for me, and I know this sounds like a little bit extreme, but I still truly feel this way. For me, I think it's very strange that some animals are pets and some animals are eaten. And so, I've just decided not to eat animals. But yeah.
Yeah. And then growing up as well, seeing your mom, build her own business, was that something that excited you, or was it more of just like it was normal? There wasn't even, that was just a part of life, or is it something that you always actually strived to be and had in the back of your mind?
Well, so the apple doesn't really fall far from the tree. So my mom, like before she started her own business, she was like a corporate controller, and I think didn't really like working for other people. And that's why she decided to start her own business to be her own boss. And I quickly realized, like, when I was working in the corporate world after college, like I didn't like working for other people as well. So it was something kind of just like normal growing up with. And I think now that I think about it and I reflect on it, I'm like, oh, that was like very inspirational. Maybe I wouldn't have thought to like strike out on my own if it weren't for my mom and my grandfather.
So I want to touch on, like you said, the corporate world. And I think what's so fascinating is, if anything, your story shows that you don't necessarily have to have experience, founding CPG companies in the food industry, being a founder. And instead, you actually came from a pretty, technical background in tech. So walk me a little bit through, at that time of your life, you graduate college and you decide to go work in the corporate world. Walk me a little bit through that experience. What were you optimizing for? How were you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I always wanted to live in San Francisco. A bunch of my family, my grandmother and my father grew up in San Francisco. And I applied to law school in San Francisco, quickly realized I didn't want to go to law school. I just wanted to move to San Francisco, so I did. And this was kind of an exciting time because this was when like solar and energy storage was kind of new. And so I took a job at Solar City, which is like now Tesla. It was pre-IPO. There was maybe, 1,000 employees at the time. That was just like kind of a crash course on startup life and working for like a company that ended up IPOing a few years later. I think at the time, like, I was like 22. I just wanted to get experience and, figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. And I grew very passionate about the sustainability aspect of the business. I ended up switching to a different startup that also did energy storage as well. When you work at a startup, this was a much smaller startup. I was like employee number 20 at the time. I think when you are kind of like in that fast-paced environment, you sort of feel like a founder because there's just not that many people to do things. And so I learned a lot through that experience. And I just, I'm kind of an accidental entrepreneur. I just decided ultimately to jump into my cookie business, but I'm sure we'll get to that. So
yeah, I love that. And then given your experience at STEM, at the small startup, looking back now, do you actually advise founders to have that experience? Like, has it actually helped you a lot in the type of founder you are today? Or is it maybe even because it's in such a different industry, maybe it doesn't translate?
No, I mean, I think, it's business is business at the end of the day. Like you still have the same problems. So I'm in a lot of different groups where I'm with other entrepreneurs and they run different types of businesses, like service-based, tech businesses, et cetera. And like, we have all of the same problems, like managing the P&L, HR, operations, et cetera. And so I think, honestly, the skills really do translate.
That's great. And okay, so Lauren, you mentioned, and I have to touch on this, you mentioned how you applied to law school. So during this period, and I think this is so relevant to so many people, which is we have this concept in our mind that, there are X amount of jobs that you should go into, right? There's job security, there's all these elements to it. Was that your thought process? And what was that like to pivot? Was it scary? Were people saying you're crazy? How did that look?
Yeah, so for me, it was very cultural. I would like to think today it's very different, especially with TikTok and like all the information that's out there. But for me, it was cultural. It's like, you either should become a doctor or a lawyer, otherwise you're a failure. And honestly, I still think that deep down, I've disappointed my parents because I didn't go to grad school. Even after running a successful business, it's kind of like a funny thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it definitely was really scary. And I think my dad kind of thought I was nuts, if I'm being honest. My mom, who also is an entrepreneur, like she was all about it from day one. So it was great to have that support, as well as my husband. He's an entrepreneur as well, so he gets it too. So it's great to have that support network, but definitely my dad and some of my friends like thought I was insane for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. And I could relate, coming from Jewish parents, again, a doctor or a lawyer, like those seem like the two paths. And I think being the youngest actually, if anything, showed me, like with more time, showed me that there are other routes, and like going to, Stanford and seeing entrepreneurship and tech opened my eyes to a whole world that I hadn't known before. So I think I totally understand that. And so walk me through, while you were at STEM, startup environment, How were you like mentally? How are you feeling about your career? Were you like, okay, this is what I want to stay in. I love energy. I love sustainability and the startup environment. Or how were you thinking almost long term?
So I got like the crash course. My first job out of school was working for Elon. So I got like the whole crash course on that, went into the office every weekend, like was working like 80 plus hours a week. And then it was a very similar environment at STEM as well, just because we used to say we're, building the plane while we're flying it.
Yep.
And I was happy at the time. It was kind of an accident. I was just kind of looking for something to do outside of work and like have like a small side hustle. It wasn't even like money driven. I was making great money at the time. Yeah. It's just when I started getting large POs from large customers, I was like, okay, I can't bake all these cookies in my home kitchen anymore. I need to like go find a real baking facility and actually figure out how to scale this a bit. So
it's crazy. And so you said was it an intentional thing? We were looking for a side hustle, or was it more of like you were looking for, an alternative option, and then because of that, you were like, okay, let me start experimenting? Or were you actually kind of saying, you know what, work is great, but I need to scratch another itch?
Yeah, it was more like work is great, but I need to scratch another itch. And I went vegan at the time. And so I was just doing a lot of vegan baking at the time. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So we've entered almost, you discover, okay, you're making these cookies. At what point did you realize there's actually something here? There's an unlock. What gave that away?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a funny thing when you launch a food product, right? Because like, I remember I threw this like little gathering at my apartment to get feedback on like taste, and all my friends and family were like, it tastes great. And that's just like a total waste of time, because your friends and family will always tell you that your products taste great, right? It's like, can you get absolute strangers to buy your product off the shelf is the real question. And do you have the right offering and packaging, and are you like effectively communicating that?
And was there ever a moment, because this was all your own endeavor, right? It was entirely solo, still solo founder, CEO. Yes. How has that been? Because obviously I see a lot of startups, and seeing solo founders, you get the whole narrative. It's very lonely, and I'm sure that is true. But was there ever a moment where you were like, okay, this is too hard, I should seek out a co-founder?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the beginning, I felt lonelier. And I did look at bringing on a co-founder. Unfortunately, like circumstances just didn't make sense at the time for that person. And so I was kind of like, whatever, I'll just keep going alone at it. It bothers me less now. I've built like a great network of entrepreneurs in CPG. I was texting like 3 or 4 other entrepreneurs today, like asking them random questions. And I think that's really important. Now that I've like made it this far alone, it's just so much cleaner from like a cap table perspective. And it's like, what if you start the company with like a co-founder that like, 6 years later doesn't bring a lot of value to the table? I've seen that happen like with my friends' companies. Like, to be honest, in a lot of businesses, like I find that there's like one founder that really ends up driving the business forward. So
it's so interesting. No, it's a really good point. Yeah. And if anything, you show that it's definitely possible, and possible to build a successful one as well. So I think that's super powerful as well.
There's quite a few successful CPG businesses that are solo female founders that I can think of.
So I had on Sheely's not that long ago, Margaret Wishengrad, the founder of 3 Wishes cereal.
Yes,
and love her. Yeah. One of my favorite episodes. And so she actually probably uniquely founded it with her husband, Ian. But what we talked about is in those early days, as a first-time founder in this new industry, there's so many elements, whether it's food scientists, retail manufacturers. Like, what was the hardest part about it in those early days that probably required the highest learning curve?
Yeah. So I ended up, going back to my story about getting my large PO and trying to find essentially a co-manufacturer to produce my PO. So I was able to do that, but the co-man said to me, we'll do it, but like, you need to get a food scientist to like really make this work long term. And I was like, and they're like, we recommend this food scientist. And I was like, okay, I'll call him. And it's kind of funny because I still work with him. We have the most hilarious relationship because really, if you think about it, food scientists at the end of the day is like, they're trying to extend shelf life. So they're trying to put more ingredients in, not necessarily caring about the health benefits and extending shelf life. And like, we don't have a long shelf life for a baked cookie. Like, we're 7 months from baking. A lot of our customers, I think, wish for 12, and a lot of our competitors are 12. Yeah. And so that was the challenge, I would say, in like the first in the first year, was really going back and forth and like finding a recipe. Cause like the recipe that you bake in your kitchen is very different from what you bake at scale. Yeah. And so translating that recipe, but also staying true to like how I feel about the brand, meaning like whole food ingredients. I want it to taste as similar as it can to my home recipe, but it also needs to be produced and manufactured at scale. So finding that like sweet spot is really important. And then also, you know, you can't forget about COGS, right? Like, I can't be selling $6 cookies. Yeah. So, you know.
So did that whole process, did you ultimately have to find a different food scientist that understood, you know, the true values that you were building, or how did you end up managing that?
No, I think for me, as you know, I was younger at the time as a woman. I didn't feel comfortable pushing back, but I learned to push back. And now it's been 6 years. We still work together sometimes, and he gets it now. You know what I mean? Wow. He knows what I want. He knows what's an absolute no-go. He doesn't even have to ask me anymore. And so he's kind of, you know, not even met me halfway, because I don't want to do any of the things that he wants to do. So,
which I love. Like, I'm so happy you brought this up, because I think it's such a powerful story, actually, that applies to so many female founders, right? It's like sticking to your guns and having that conviction, and then, you know, like navigating the relationship in that regard.
Yes, exactly. And it's like a weird dynamic that I've personally experienced in CPG. It's the dynamic I've found is that brands, this is like an unpopular thing to say, but brands tend to come and go. New brands are started, lots of brands go out of business, they get acquired sometimes, et cetera. Whereas the service providers stay the same in the industry. So it's like kind of a weird dynamic if you think about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Lauren, in those early days, like you said, you had that moment, you know, having your friends and family try it, probably lying to you, maybe not, but they're always going to say it's good. Yeah. And then eventually what was that actual tangible process that you did to say, you know what, I have to see if there's something here. Where did you go to farmers markets? Where were you giving them out or selling them?
Yeah. So our first customers were local grocery stores in San Francisco, like Rainbow Grocery in the Mission was an early customer. Cool. Oakville Grocery in Napa, I think, was like our second or third retail customer. And they still both of them still buy from us, which is kind of amazing. Yeah. And then we also did coffee shops. And, you know, at this time I wasn't in distribution. So I was like personally delivering cookies and collecting cash from these coffee shops and retailers.
I love it. And were you just walking into the store with your cookie, telling them, you know, this is plant-based, healthy cookie, an alternative option. Can you sell them? Like, what was that messaging?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I was just hitting the pavement, walking into stores, asking them if they would sell us. And, you know, here's a sample, here's our attributes. And I mean, I only had 2 flavors at the time. It was chocolate chia and cherry almonds. And I mean, that kind of speaks to how great San Francisco is. Always willing to support local businesses, which I love.
Did you have any early rejections of being like, come on, Lauren, get out?
Oh my God, yes.
What was that experience like?
Yeah, how did you? So I didn't really understand where my cookies should be sold, and that it was like a niche product. I thought like, oh, everyone would want to eat my cookies. So I did walk into like, a bodega type store in the Mission. And the guy was basically, the owner was basically like, get out. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
So it took time for you to realize, like, you know what, maybe this specific coffee shop who values like a Whole Foods type of retailer, they value this. This is where I need to be.
Yeah, it definitely took time. It also pretty quickly, like within a few months, I'm looking at my financials and I'm just like, God, this is going to be hard to scale without distribution, because I had like 30 stores or 40 stores and I'm like spending most of my time delivering and collecting. And it's just, I'm like, okay, this is not gonna scale.
Naturally, right? And at what point, and this probably maybe happened much, much earlier, but at what point did you say, I got to leave STEM. I got to leave, working for someone. I'm actually ready to just, grab this and I'm off in a rocket ship, if you will. When did you realize that?
Yeah. So I have a friend who worked at one of the like big technology campuses. You could probably guess which one. They had tens of thousands of employees.
Yeah.
And he was just like, your cookies are great. Would love to bring them in to like the cafeteria, or we give out free snacks in our, corporate kitchens. And I was like, great. And so then he ended up connecting me with someone there. That person ended up giving me a large PO for a couple pallets. That's when I transitioned over to co-manufacturing because I couldn't make 2 pallets in my home kitchen. And then I was like, I delivered it, long story short. And then I started getting other customers of a similar size. And I was just like, okay, well, this could scale compared to what I was doing direct retail at the time. And this is interesting. So it took about a year of that, of really focusing on kind of pantries and food service. And then I was just like, okay, maybe I should focus on this full time because it's doing pretty good. Yeah.
And Lauren, I think what's so fascinating, just how you even describe these early days, is there are so many people who have ideas, right? And especially for type like CPG companies, and going from idea to actually creating something and even walking into a coffee shop, there's a big gap. And, there's people are scared. There's a lot of, fears around it. What advice do you have for maybe someone similar to you, doesn't come from CPG founder background per se, but they have these ideas? What would you tell them to almost get started?
I mean, just talk to people in the industry. Like if you can like reach into your network and just try to set up like a 20-minute call with someone running a CPG company, just to learn a little bit more and like what you're thinking about getting into. I mean, I take these calls like probably a couple times a month. It's like, like my old college roommate's cousin wants to start a CPG company. Will you talk to her for 30 minutes? Like, yeah, of course. Everyone in the industry is very nice, and they're willing to talk to anyone. It's a tough industry, so I think it's also good to go eyes wide open.
Yeah.
It's also very capital intensive, this industry. So that was another thing. I didn't really understand that when I started either.
So I think that's I could go, I have so many questions, but given that, right, you said it's very capitally intensive and you actually didn't raise external funding and you bootstrapped it. So walk me through that process and the decision to do that and how that ultimately has been.
When you're launching a CPG product, it's important to understand like what channels you'll sell your product through. So like we're a shelf-stable ambient cookie, a little bit niche, but I would like to think we're more mainstream now. But we really can be sold in a variety of channels. Like we can be sold on e-com and Amazon. We can be like a food service type product. Like we can be in grocery stores, in retail. We can be in airports, etc. But the thing that's interesting is that contribution margins vary very differently per channel. And so trying to understand like what channel you're going to focus on. If it's a fully retail channel, I can tell you now retail is very expensive and you're going to have to raise, or if you're just fully focused on retail. And if you're selling like a frozen, like an ice cream, a beverage, something like that, I think it's difficult to run companies like that without raising, just because of shipping costs and high MOQs for production runs and things and like nuances like that. So because we're an ambient product, we can focus on more profitable, and we have a lot of channels to choose from. We can focus on more profitable channels to fund the less profitable ones, if that makes sense.
That's so it's because that you've had all of these different channels that have almost enabled you. So maybe like one channel, because it's like lower margins, or at least you're able to then fund another one, and vice versa.
Yes.
Okay.
So it does help a lot. Also, having like a line of credit to fund production runs, or some type of banking relationship, that's important as well.
Yeah. Was there a moment during this journey so far where you were like, look, we need to, like, you got very close to saying we need to raise external funding, it's becoming too hard and it's maybe like too risky?
We've made it this far, but I've not closed the door on raising external funding. It just depends on how quickly we want to grow.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And so, as I mentioned in the intro, your product is now in, Sprouts, Whole Foods, Costco, which is incredible. Tell me a little bit about that journey beyond, corporate cafeterias, like you said. What did that look like? And also a rejection, again, like you mentioned even before with shelf life and how that works. What was that process like for you?
Going back to 2020, we're primarily a food service business. We service some local stores in San Francisco, but we were really focused on the technology companies because positive contribution margin, and as a one-woman show, is easy to like service just this one channel, no marketing spend, the whole thing. And so COVID happened, everything gets shut down. Business goes to basically zero. I have like 20 pallets, like all over the place. San Francisco shuts down. Like, it's kind of a disaster. Long story short, I was able to like short sell all of the product that was supposed to go to the offices. But I was just like, what do I do now? I have no sales. Like, I have no idea what to do. I had applied to the local program through Whole Foods Market and kind of forgot about it. And then around that time, heard we were greenlit for a 40-store test in Whole Foods Market. And I was just like, okay, this is my sign to keep going, because I was really going to shut down at that point. And so Whole Foods is really unique because they let you essentially start out with a region. And mind you, I had no idea what I was doing in retail. Like, I was not in UNFI. I was not in distribution, barely. We had this like very pastel packaging that was hard to read. Like, I didn't really understand like where I was supposed to be in the store. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. But the amazing thing about Whole Foods is that they give you the sales data for free, which is not all retailers do this. And so I was able to test these 40 stores and really refine our packaging, understand like what type of marketing promotions like we should run to really see the lift, like where we belong in the store. I ended up revamping our packaging. And then from there, we were able to expand to another additional 3 regions. And then we have an exciting announcement later this year about them. But it's just, they're a great partner. So like, they are willing to work with smaller brands and really kind of, I don't want to say incubate them, but really like let them grow and flourish in a way that they're like, these brands are comfortable, right? Because again, they understand that grocery is expensive. And so through that experience, I've been able to really refine like our major call outs and why our customers are buying our products. And at the end of the day, it's really our ingredient profile. So we've really emphasized that, as well as like our protein content. But like, when you're in the early days, you don't really understand like what your call outs are to your customers.
And how does that, so explain to me what that means. So how do you even know that, even if you're getting the data from Whole Foods, how are they able to determine why someone's buying it? Like, how are you able to know that a call out is the ingredients versus protein amount?
Yeah. So we send out lots and lots of surveys to our customers. And then what we did is we changed our packaging in a way to call out the protein, and we saw our sales increase through Whole Foods Market. So there's a little, it's not like quite a science, but retail marketing sometimes is not
more of an art, if anything.
It's a little bit of an art sometimes, but yeah.
So take me through, it sounds like getting into that program at Whole Foods was a bit of a saving grace, if you will. Like, COVID happened, so many businesses shut down. What was that like for you mentally before that, getting into Whole Foods? And how did you get through it mentally?
I mean, I would like to think I'm a pretty resilient person. I think it was COVID, so I think a lot of things were going through people's minds at the time. Like, are we going to all die? And like cleaning our groceries and stuff like that. So that was pretty crazy. But I mean, I don't know. I think there's just something in me that's just very resilient, and I like to problem solve. And so I kind of had a feeling that things were going to get better and eventually the world would go back to normal, and like, where was our place in that? And so, but yeah, I mean, it was a tough time. Like, for everyone, it was a tough time.
But if anything, it touches on the importance of resilience, especially for founding a company. I think there's always ups and downs, and maybe the downs last a little bit longer and whatnot. But I think it's just how you come out of that, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And Lauren, one thing you mentioned even through that process was the packaging and changing, to highlight call outs and whatnot. And I'm just, learning by you right now. But I'd love to know, how did you come up with the name? And if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was called Complete Eats before, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that process of naming it and then ultimately changing it.
Man, you went down the Google rabbit hole to know that. Yeah, so when we first launched, we were Complete Eats, sharing the E. It was problematic for many reasons. Hard to spell, sounded like a meal prep company.
Okay, yeah.
The original packaging was very hard to read. It was not retail ready. And so I was talking to one of my mentors who has like a huge design background, and she scaled like a beauty brand. And she kept saying to me, Lauren, your last name is Chew, spelled Chew, and you sell chewy cookies. Like, how is this not incorporated? And so we actually did the branding exercise together, and it was like a 6-month process. And we landed on Love+Chew, and everyone loves the name. And I just think it's so fun when I'm like out at trade shows or I'm pitching a buyer or on a podcast. I just love saying, hi, my name is Lauren Chew and I'm with Love+Chew. I think it's just fun.
I love it. I agree. And was there a moment where you actually saw a significant bump in sales once that packaging and design and the name changed?
Yeah, so we did see a significant bump. We focused on brighter colors. Yeah, we focused on call outs, making things easier to read. Because again, like when you first start a CPG food product brand, or even a beauty brand, you may not necessarily know why your consumers are coming to you. You're just kind of thrilled that they're buying your products, you know what I mean? And they're not related to you or whatever. Yeah, so it's definitely a process. I mean, my biggest advice for people that are very early is just stay with the labels. Don't worry about the printed bags or printed film. Because you're going to change your packaging a bunch of times. So why waste the money on printed?
So choose probably the simplest, least expensive packaging, if you will, because it probably will change.
Yeah, because when you do printing, you have to pay for printing plates, and they're just not cheap. And so every time you change anything on your packaging, you have to pay for it. So you may as well just stick with labels that are digitally printed as long as you can until you understand really why people are buying your products and where you live in the grocery store. So,
and then when it comes to the name, how do you think of that? Is that something also to maybe be more mindful of in the beginning stages and be clear, or is that also okay to change, if you will?
I mean, we changed our name very early.
Okay.
We were in 200 doors or something like that, so I think it would be harder to do now. Actually, I know it would be harder to do now because it's a whole paperwork process through distribution, because we're national in 3 different distributors right now. I'm already imagining the paperwork nightmare that is. So I would say, yes, change your name sooner if you can.
Incredible. Okay. And at what point did you actually have kids and start a family? And how did that come into the overall, being a founder of this great company? What did you have to give and take?
Yeah, so I had my first baby I got pregnant during COVID, as everyone else did.
Yep.
It was a little unplanned, but that's okay. And I mean, and now I have a second. so I have Rose, she's 3.5, and Ezra, who's 1. And it's, I love being a mom. It's definitely a balancing act, like every single day. And I tell people this all the time to set the expectation. This is the busiest I've been in my entire life. Like, I literally have no time for anything else besides running the business and raising my kids and sometimes my husband. And like, so
such a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And like I was telling you before, I'm like I was involved with some community organizations, kind of stepping back because that's just the reality of my life right now. And I love it and I'm cool with it. I don't know. I love hiring moms too. I think moms have superpowers and we get so much done because there's always so much to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And is there something, and I'm, by the way, I have to say, I think that's so valuable for other moms to hear because, there are superpowers and there are things you learn, with being a mom and multitasking and everything that it actually can be very conducive to founding a great company. And do you find that it's probably helped that Love+Chew was off the ground? Or, I mean, during COVID, it was around that time as well where things were shut down. So what was that transition like?
Yeah, I mean, like we always wish we have good timing on things, you know what I mean? And, my kids are really young right now and I wish my company were further along. Like, to be frank, I wish my company were further along and like maybe I would hire a CEO to run more of the day-to-day and take a step back. But at the same time, like my personality is that I love being involved in the weeds of running the business. So I don't know if I could step back.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, there's some great founders in the CPG business who have like 3 or 4 kids and, every day you just kind of make it all work and hang in there,
And Lauren, as you reflect on this whole journey that you've been on, and I'm sure, many mistakes were made, maybe some bigger than others. Yeah. Is there a mistake that particularly stands out and maybe still gives you nightmares, if you will? And how did you kind of come out of it?
In this business, the mistakes cost you money, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you could probably guess who this customer is. They're over it. I'm over it too. And we're moving forward together. So it's all good. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's a very large customer. And we had a supply chain issue where our bananas were stuck in South America. And we did not have a good backup supplier at the time.
Okay.
So we could not deliver the POs. They got canceled. It costs a lot of money. It's basically the genesis of the story. Yeah. So my big lesson from that is always have multiple backup suppliers. Your vendor relationships. We have a wonderful director of ops. Her name is Kristen. All of our vendors love her. She has great relationships. It's really important. That's the thing about CPG. Like your vendor relationships and your co-man relationships are basically just as important as your customer relationships. Because if you cannot make your product, if you don't have product, then you have nothing to sell, essentially. So that was traumatizing, that whole experience, to be honest, and probably lost a year off my life.
Understandably. And it reminds me too, actually, Margaret even said this, how important relationships are in this business, and like, again, all the different angles of it as well. So it just shows like all these different, things that can come up, but ultimately having a good relationship with the vendors and whatnot goes such a long way. Yeah.
And the industry is really small. We all see each other at the shows. It's just, I think like my role in life is like, I don't burn bridges. Like I don't believe in that, but I mean, like you really should not burn bridges in CPG because you will see them at the show or wherever.
What is something you wish you knew before starting this company?
I go back and forth on this when I reflect on this because if I knew how hard it was going to be, I don't know if I would have done it, if I'm being honest. So I think there's something that's like very great about being a young entrepreneur and starting something new and not exactly knowing what you're getting into, because I think that kind of gets you pretty far, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would really change anything, to be honest.
But I think you're so right. It's the naivete, if you will, that you go into things that actually is a superpower in many ways.
And you see, CPG is a weird industry because you see people doing the second and third acts. You hear like whatever founder, they sold their business to Mondelez or whoever, Unilever, for hundreds of millions of dollars. And then they try to start something else in CPG and it just like goes nowhere. And that's like what's so humbling, I think, about CPG. But I think there is something special about the first time entrepreneur in this industry. So that's just a personal opinion.
And if anything, again, it seems more like an art than a science. Like there isn't one formula to succeed. So again,
and we're selling a consumer good. So like consumers really dictate success, to be honest, with their dollars.
And Lauren, what is something that you've actually learned about yourself through this journey that you've been on?
That's a good question too. I think, when I first started my business, it was like very confusing for me, especially when I quit my job and kind of went out on my own. I was used to like having a boss tell me what to do and like what my priorities were. And so I think the first year or two, especially when I was working alone, I had no employees, like a few contractors. It was very difficult for me to kind of like structure my days and sort of figure out like what to prioritize, because I always had someone telling me what to do. And then now I have this like newfound freedom and I can do whatever I want, but I need to like prioritize like and do what's best for the business, obviously. So, yeah.
And given that, actually, not only did you report to someone and someone was telling you what to do, but now you're actually in a position where you're telling other people what to do and you're hiring and you're building a company and a culture. What did that look like for you, and how did you gain those skills to do it effectively?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of like business coaching, especially when you start as an entrepreneur, when you start hiring more people and growing the team. I think, the personal development aspect of it is really important. Yeah. So I'm a firm believer of, like the employer-employee like contract, if you will, needs to be mutually beneficial. And so I'm not afraid of having like the tough conversations with my employees and addressing the elephant in the room in terms of what they need to make this work for them and what I need. And it has to work both ways. So like an example is like I have an employee who has like a lot of at-home obligations, and she really needed like a level of flexibility to meet her at-home obligations. And we had a very candid conversation about it. And we decided to meet halfway on that, and we're both really happy about it. So
I think that's a superpower, to have frank, candid conversations, but in a very effective and almost coming from empathy maybe. But I want to hear from you, like, do you have tips that other leaders can also take into the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to have these conversations, because honestly, they'll happen like either way. So it's better to have it in like a positive way, in a very calm way, in a very professional way, if that makes sense. I think for me, the mistake I've made in the past is, I hate firing people. Like, who likes firing people? It's awful. You know what I mean? Like, it's uncomfortable. So I think for me, like, knowing when someone's not going to work out earlier has been a really good flex for us, because if it's not going to work, they're unhappy, we're unhappy, it's just not a fit, then like, what's the point of prolonging it? I find that when we've had to let people go, which hasn't happened that many times, but it's a fact of doing business. I think there's just been relief on both sides. And if you can do anything to soften their landing, that would be ideal. So that's what we do. I mean, honestly, like, I truly care about the people that I work with. Like, I want to know what's going on in their personal lives. And, we get together for an annual retreat every year. We talk every day. We're in constant communication. We're a fully remote company. That was also another skill I had to learn, is how to run a fully remote company, because that's very different than being in the office. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I think COVID forced a lot of people to do that, but that's amazing. And Lauren, I want to know, as a female founder, have you ever had moments of like, shit, can I do this? And what do I like, who do I need to talk to in order to gain that confidence? Like, how did you kind of go through that? And if anything, advice for other female founders who also question their own capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've questioned myself.
Yeah.
I think it's because I've just been on this journey for like 6.5 years, so I've just gotten used to how it is. But like going back to like the first year, like definitely, I think it was hard, right? Because when you're a new brand and like you don't have a product to market, like convincing vendors to work with you, convincing co-mans and other like packaging suppliers to work with you, they're just like, yeah, that's nice. Like, seems cute,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think one thing about myself is like I have a sales background, so like I'm very persistent. So I just kept calling them until they would do business with me.
I love that.
Yeah, but I think deep down, like, I was kind of faking it until I made it, and I think we all kind of have to just silence that inner voice,
Yep.
and so.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, Lauren, I want to ask you a few more fun questions, if you will, which first is, if you had the power to assign a book to everyone on earth to read and really understand, which book would you choose?
Is it business related?
No, could be anything.
Okay. I'm still gonna stick to a business book, actually.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm a big fan. It's called The Challenger Sale. It was written kind of a while ago, probably in the 90s, but I feel like the principles still really apply to today.
Yeah.
And it's basically like sales 101. And I know a lot of people will be like, well, like, I'm not a salesperson. Like, when I start my business, I'll just hire a salesperson. The fact is, you are always selling. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So you may as well learn a little bit how to sell and the mentality behind it. So yeah.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited to read it. I think if anything, I think most people say early founders, they have to be salespeople, like you're selling always. So, and whether that's even hiring, you're selling your vision, your company. So
yeah,
that's awesome. Okay. Amazing. I will check that out too. Lauren, I want to know, how do you define success, and has it changed over the last maybe 6 to 8 years, if you will?
Yeah, so it's changed a lot since I've had kids, honestly. Yeah.
Please.
So I think before having kids, I was, solely focused on my career, getting ahead. At one point, like, I wanted to climb the ladder, become an executive, that sort of thing, before I went out on my own. For me now, like, success looks like, working from home and taking a lunch break and like taking my kids to the park. And I know that sounds really simple, you know what I mean? But having like the freedom and the flexibility to like spend time with my family. And that's why so many people want to work for us, is because we do offer that at Love+Chew. Like, it's definitely, because we're growing quickly, it's definitely a busy job, but we do offer that flexibility. We recognize that people have lives outside of work, and it's really important to fill your cup, whether it is spending time with your children or your spouse or going surfing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's amazing. No, I love that. And my final question for you is, what craft are you spending a lifetime honing?
I grew up skiing, love it, because I'm a mom and a founder. Don't ski as much as I want to every season. Usually just do one trip if I'm lucky, maybe 5 ski days. But the thing about skiing is, like, it's during the winter, right? Unless you're going to Chile during the summer or something, you can't really ski year round. And so it's kind of humbling, because every time each ski season comes around, you're kind of like, okay, I got to remember how to do this again type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, it continually challenges me. It takes me to different places, different, ski resorts around the country. And it's just something I enjoy. When I'm going down a mountain, I kind of like hit a Zen state. And, I'm excited for this season because I'm going to teach my daughter. So
amazing.
Almost 4. Yeah. So
that's amazing. And if anything, it humbles you, I think. After taking a big break and you go back, you're like, oh shit, I gotta work on it. Which is
definitely
great.
humbles. Yeah, definitely humbles me.
That's amazing. Lauren, it has been so fun. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Your story to founding Love+Chew has been, it's so fun, and it's so great to see everything you've done. So thank you for sharing it.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for listening to the show this week. If you enjoyed, please spread the word. Tell someone about She Leads or post about it on social media and tag us. If you want to contact us, feel free to send over a message through the She Leads Instagram page at sheleads.show. If you want to follow us on Twitter, our account is at SheLeadsShow, and mine is at Carly Malatsky. This episode was produced and edited by Nick Verschow. Thank you also to our partner, Floodgate. If you're passionate about startups and want to learn more about the starting journey of those who have built groundbreaking companies, I highly recommend listening to Starting Greatness with Mike Maples Jr., the founding partner of Floodgate. He has an incredible show that, in my opinion, is definitely worth your time. Thanks again.